picture the landscape for just a second. It's August 2026.
Right around the corner.
Exactly. And the European Union's AI Act has officially crossed the threshold into full enforcement. So the grace periods are over. The regulatory hammer is coming down.
No more excuses.
Right, no extensions. Every enterprise operating in Europe has to definitively prove with actual documentation and active monitoring that their AI governance is mature.
Which is a huge hurdle for most.
It is. Because, according to a 2024 McKinsey report, 60% of European organizations currently lack formal AI governance structures entirely.
Yeah, 60%.
I mean, more than half of the enterprise ecosystem hasn't even poured a foundation for compliance, yet they are staring down this hard regulatory deadline. The gap between, corporate AI ambition and compliant execution is just widening by the day.
It's a massive operational blind spot. And to understand why this matters so intensely for you right now, whether you're a CTO, a business leader, or a senior developer evaluating how your organization adopts machine learning, we have to look at the actual workload.
Right. What are they actually building?
Exactly. We aren't talking about low-stakes applications like, I don't know, chatbots drafting internal memos. Gartner data from 2024 indicates that 92% of enterprise AI projects involve what the EU AI Act classifies as high-risk applications.
92%. So basically almost everything that actually moves the needle.
Yeah. We are talking about automated financial decision-making, healthcare diagnostics, algorithmic hiring pipelines. For those specific applications, compliance is not some post-launch checklist. It's literally a matter of business continuity.
Because if you can't prove your governance, mathematically and procedurally, regulators can just enforce total operational shutdowns.
They will just pull the plug. You simply cannot run your systems.
And that brings us to the core mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking an extensive article from AetherLink.
Right, the Dutch AI consulting firm.
Yeah, they operate 3 distinct product lines. There's etherbot for AI agents, Ademai Aind for AI strategy and governance, and etherdv for development. So we're using their internal research to explore a really specific, emerging architectural solution to this bottleneck.
Which is the fractional AI lead architect.
Exactly. And just to clarify the jargon for a second, fractional just means bringing in an interim executive heavy hitter on a part-time basis. So the proposition we are testing today is whether this fractional model is like the ultimate strategic bypass for enterprise readiness.
Well, the structural problem with the traditional approach is just time. When enterprise realizes they need governance, the default reflex is to, open a requisition for a full-time chief AI officer, a CAO.
Right. Get a permanent captain for the ship.
But the AetherLink sources point out that sourcing, vetting, and hiring a CAO takes anywhere from 6 to 12 months.
Wow.
And on top of that, the compensation packages are running between 200,000 and 400,000 euros annually. You're burning through a year of runway just trying to get someone in the chair.
Let me challenge that premise for a second, though. If we're talking about high-risk infrastructure that could trigger regulatory shutdowns, shouldn't a company insist on a full-time leader? I mean, bringing in a fractional consultant feels like renting a captain while the ship is sinking.
I get that.
Right. If I'm a CTO, I want the person building my governance to be permanently accountable for it.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like prioritizing short-term cost savings.
Well, the flaw in that traditional mindset is assuming a permanent hire guarantees speed. Relying on a full-time search actually introduces massive temporal risk.
Because of the hiring delay.
Exactly. If you spend 9 months hunting for the ideal CAO and another 3 months onboarding them, you've burned a year of your runway to that 2026 deadline. A fractional AI lead architect from a firm like Ademai Aind bypasses that entirely.
Okay, so they get in faster.
Way faster. And they cost 30 to 50% less, typically 15,000 to 30,000 euros a month. But the critical metric is deployment velocity. They can begin designing your governance framework within 2 weeks of signing the contract.
2 weeks versus a year. That's a wild difference.
Yeah, because they aren't there to learn the company politics. They arrive with a pre-built regulatory playbook.
So the fractional architect is fundamentally an accelerator. They bridge that immediate gap between business strategy and technical execution. But let's look at what they are actually executing.
Right.
We know who is doing the fixing, but we need to examine what they are fixing that, a highly competent in-house IT team couldn't just handle themselves. Like, why can't a senior engineering team just read the EU AI Act and build the compliance checks?
That brings us to a critical architectural shift, agentic AI.
Yeah. And to define the mechanism for you listening,
Yeah.
agentic AI moves beyond just prompt and response. These are autonomous, multi-step AI agents operating across enterprise systems.
They're essentially acting on their own.
Right. Instead of a human querying a database, an agentic AI recognizes a threshold has been crossed, autonomously pulls data from your CRM, analyzes it, drafts a financial risk report, and emails it out, all without a human in the loop.
And Forrester reports that 73% of CIOs plan to pilot these agentic programs by 2025 and 2026.
So it's everywhere.
It is. And this is where standard IT frameworks just begin to fracture.
Right.
We are transitioning from deterministic IT to probabilistic IT. That's the core technical hurdle.
Deterministic versus probabilistic. Break that down.
Sure. Standard IT governance is deterministic. If a server load hits a certain threshold, spin up another instance. If a user lacks credentials, block access. You're monitoring software uptime and basic access control.
It's binary.
Exactly. But an agentic AI is probabilistic. It writes its own logic pathways based on the data it ingests. CMS Consulting actually found that only 28% of organizations attempting to use generic IT maturity models achieve sustainable AI implementation.
Wow, 28%.
Yeah. You just cannot govern a probabilistic model with a deterministic checklist.
I mean, if an API fails, it throws a 404 error and you just read the log, right? But if an agentic AI fails, it might hallucinate a biased financial projection, confidently present it as fact, and then act on it.
And the server is totally healthy the whole time.
Exactly. The AI is fully online, but the output is disastrous. Governing that requires an entirely different layer of telemetry. You need explainability logging.
The ability to freeze the model and extract the exact node weights and decision trees that led to a specific output.
And real-time bias detection. The AetherLink article actually refers to deploying agentic AI without these mechanisms as corporate Russian roulette.
It's a harsh phrase, but it's mathematically accurate. You are exposing the enterprise to accuracy degradation, regulatory audits, and total loss of user trust.
So how does AetherMind actually solve this?
To prevent that, they utilize a custom 4-phase readiness framework. It operates on a highly compressed timeline of 4 to 6 weeks, costing roughly 18 to 35,000 euros. But the real value isn't just the speed.
It's the technical depth.
Right. Let's unpack the mechanics of that framework rather than just treating it like a menu. Phase 1 is the diagnostic.
And for a CTO listening, this isn't just a survey, right?
No, not at all. This is active discovery, mapping out data flows and hunting down shadow AI that your teams might already be using without authorization.
Then phase 2 is governance design, which is where the abstract EU AI Act requirements are translated into actual JIRA tickets and engineering protocols.
Exactly, making the law into code. Then phase 3 is capability building, which is deeply technical. This isn't some high-level seminar. The fractional architect is actively installing technical tools into your CI/CD pipeline.
Like automated fairness audits.
Yes, and telemetry dashboards. They are training your machine learning engineers on how to interpret explainability logs. And finally, phase 4 is optimization.
Establishing the continuous monitoring loops.
Right. They are architecting a system where compliance is just automated alongside the code.
But, theory and frameworks always look great on a slide deck. Let's see how this actually holds up under stress, because the source material details a specific case study that grounds this perfectly.
The Utrecht case.
Yeah. We're looking at a mid-market fintech company based in Utrecht, managing roughly 150 million euros in assets. And they deployed a proprietary credit scoring AI system. But they did it without formal governance protocols in place.
And credit scoring is explicitly categorized as a high-risk application under the impending regulations. The scrutiny there is absolute.
Right. So a regulatory audit hit them, and it uncovered mathematical bias in their automated lending decisions. The model was skewing approvals based on proxy variables in the training data that correlated with protected demographic classes.
Which is a nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. They had models in live production with zero explainability logs, no cross-functional oversight, and they were staring at severe penalties while being totally misaligned for that 2026 enforcement deadline.
That's the exact scenario traditional IT maturity models fail to catch, though. The code was functioning perfectly from a software engineering perspective.
The servers were fast.
Yeah, but the statistical output was non-compliant. So the fintech engaged AetherMind, and a fractional AI lead architect stepped in for a 12-week intervention.
Let's look at what actually happened during those 12 weeks.
Yeah.
First, the architect designed a rigorous risk classification framework for all data inputs.
Crucial first step.
Second, they implemented fairness audits directly into the existing models. So developers literally couldn't push an update to the lending algorithm without the pipeline automatically testing the outputs against synthetic baseline data.
Checking for demographic skew automatically.
Exactly. And third, they established an AI ethics board.
Which I have to point out, the implementation of that ethics board is key. Because often companies treat an ethics board as a detached committee of executives who meet like once a quarter to review documents.
A rubber stamp.
Right. But this fractional lead integrated the ethics board directly into the Agile sprint cycle. It pulled members from finance, legal compliance, and the core technical team.
So they forced the isolated silos of the business to evaluate the probabilistic risks before a single line of code was pushed to production.
Exactly. And the technical results of that intervention are phenomenal. 6 months post-engagement, this fintech achieved full compliance with the EU AI Act 4 months ahead of the August 2026 deadline.
Wow. 4 months early.
Yeah. They improved their bias metrics by 34% across all their lending models. And when regulators returned for the follow-up audit, the company passed with 0 findings.
Passing with 0 findings is huge. But I do want to push back on one thing here. Averting a catastrophic audit is the obvious victory. But we need to address the inherent friction between governance and development speed.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, if I'm managing a team of developers, hearing about mandatory fairness audits, explainability logging, and cross-functional ethics boards, that sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare. Doesn't injecting this much heavy governance fundamentally throttle innovation?
It seems like it would, right?
Yeah. If my engineers have to pass every algorithmic tweak through an ethics committee and a bias audit, aren't we just crippling our time to market?
That assumption is basically the most pervasive misconception in enterprise tech right now. And the data from the Utrecht case study completely shatters it.
How so?
Following the 12-week intervention, that fintech company didn't slow down. They actually deployed subsequent AI projects 40% faster.
Wait, really? How does adding regulatory checkpoints result in a 40% increase in deployment velocity? The math there feels contradictory.
Think about the engineering of a Formula One car. The reason a driver can confidently take a corner at 200 miles an hour is not solely because of the engine. It's because the driver has absolute trust in the brakes.
Oh.
Before the fractional architect arrived, every new AI project at that fintech was a bespoke compliance nightmare. The developers were constantly second-guessing their data sources, terrified of accidentally deploying another bias model and triggering another audit.
So development was just paralyzed by ambiguity. They were trying to invent the brakes while driving the car.
Precisely. The fractional lead didn't just write policies. They built the compliance gates directly into the development pipeline. Once the guardrails were systematized, once the fairness audits were automated, and the explainability logs were generated by default, the developers were liberated to just code.
Because they knew the system would catch the errors.
Exactly. Governance was no longer an afterthought bolted onto the end of the project. It was an enabler built into the infrastructure. Risk mitigation and innovation velocity became perfectly aligned.
Governance as an enabler of speed. That is a massive paradigm shift. But, re-engineering the CI/CD pipeline and the telemetry that's only solving the technical half of the equation, we are still dealing with the human layer.
Which is usually the hardest part.
Yeah, Deloitte published data in 2024 showing that 64% of AI transformation initiatives fail entirely. And they don't fail because the algorithms lack precision. They fail due to massive gaps in change management.
Right, because technical governance frameworks, no matter how automated they are entirely useless if the organization itself resists them.
So how does a fractional executive who is only in the building for 3 months successfully alter the culture of an established enterprise?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
They don't have the long-term political capital of a permanent C-suite executive.
A skilled fractional AI lead architect actually leverages their temporary status as a strength.
No.
They aren't entangled in legacy office politics, which allows them to be completely objective. They identify the specific pockets of resistance, which is often middle management worried about operational disruption, or technical teams resentful of new oversight.
Right.
And they don't just hand over a PDF of governance policies, they actively train the engineering teams on how to leverage the new monitoring tools. And simultaneously, they prepare the business units for what AI-augmented workflows actually look like.
So they reframe the narrative around governance.
Exactly. It's no longer a bureaucratic burden enforced by legal. It becomes a competitive advantage. Demonstrating mathematically verified ethical AI to your clients is a massive commercial differentiator.
You're shifting the employees from viewing compliance as a hurdle to viewing it as a product feature. That's smart. Taking a step back, though, the AetherLink source highlights a very specific geographic phenomenon driving this model.
Yes, the Dutch advantage.
Right. The Netherlands, particularly tech hubs like Utrecht and Amsterdam, is operating as the primary incubator for fractional AI consultancy in Europe. Why is that?
The advantage there is deeply structural. Dutch enterprises operate under a unique set of pressures that really accelerates their maturity. First, you have intense regulatory proximity.
Because they are physically and culturally adjacent to the core EU governance centers.
Exactly. It means these companies anticipate strict, early enforcement of directives like the AI Act. They don't operate under the illusion that they can fly under the radar.
They are building for the strictest possible interpretation of the law from day one.
Furthermore, they possess incredibly high digital maturity. Dutch enterprises have largely completed their general digital transformations, meaning complex AI adoption is their immediate frontier.
That makes sense.
But the absolute catalyst is their data governance legacy. The Netherlands has a deeply entrenched history of rigorous GDPR enforcement. That cultural and technical muscle memory, the instinct to protect data privacy, secure pipelines, map data provenance, it translates flawlessly into AI compliance architecture.
Oh, wow. Yeah, if an enterprise already understands how to build a GDPR-compliant data lake, the leap to building an EU AI Act-compliant machine learning model is much shorter.
They already speak the language of algorithmic accountability.
So the consultants at Ethermind are taking that deep native European regulatory intuition, combining it with agile technical implementation, and just exporting it across the continent through this fractional model.
They are essentially packaging Dutch regulatory rigor and technical agility into a deployable 12-week intervention.
It's a brilliant model. Looking at everything we've unpacked today in this deep dive, as enterprises stare down the edge of that August 2026 cliff, we need to distill this into actionable takeaways for you listening. For me, the most critical insight is that governance creates velocity.
Absolutely.
The Utrecht FinTech case study fundamentally rewrites the playbook on regulation. The fact that systematizing strict compliance guardrails allowed developers to deploy AI projects 40% faster, it proves that the EU AI Act doesn't have to be a bottleneck. If you engineer your governance directly into the pipeline, your teams can run faster because they know the safety nets are mathematically sound and always active.
It flips the traditional risk model totally on its head.
What's your top takeaway?
My primary takeaway focuses on the immense risk of scaling agentic AI without that architecture. As autonomous, multi-agent systems move out of sandbox environments and into live production throughout 2025 and 2026, the stakes transition from minor errors to systemic failures.
If they act on their own.
Right. Governance by design is not just a corporate buzzword anymore. When an AI possesses the agency to execute workflows independently, proactive governance is the only barrier preventing massive regulatory exposure and the evaporation of user trust. You cannot bolt a fairness audit onto an autonomous agent after it has already executed a biased financial decision.
The telemetry has to be native to the system before the agent is ever turned on, which leads us to a final, entirely new perspective on where this is all heading.
Yeah, we've spent this time discussing the fractional AI-led architect as a temporary bridge to eventual permanent hires. But think about this. If an interim architect can drop into a struggling enterprise, construct the technical guardrails, embed the cultural change management, and leave the company operating 40% faster in just 12 weeks.
You're wondering if we even need the permanent role.
Exactly. We have to ask a larger question about the future of corporate structure. Is the permanent chief AI officer role actually a temporary phenomenon?
Oh, wow.
Once these fractional experts build the automated telemetry, and once AI agents are sophisticated enough to monitor and govern other AI agents in real time, the need for a permanent human CAO might vanish entirely. We may be looking at a future where the only human governance required is a brief fractional tune-up every few years.
A fascinating architectural reality to consider. The role everyone is scrambling to hire today might be obsolete tomorrow, replaced by the very systems they are trying to govern. For more AI insights, visit etherlink.ai.